we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. So this is obviously our sort of talk, discussion, workshop on unschoolers and going to college. And then directly after this, Alex will be hosting a talk workshop on unschoolers and careers. So thanks for joining us. I think the way that we had imagined doing this was that Rhianon and I would both share a little bit of our journeys about how we got to college, the sort of admissions process, how we got there. And then I have a copy of my transcript that I wrote with my mom. And I have a copy of that I can attach if people would be interested in seeing it. And then after that, I think we just have time for questions. If people kind of think of anything that they maybe want to ask, or any comments, anything like that. Sound good for people? All right, cool. I don't know, Rhianon, do you want me to go first, or do you want to go? Really up to you.
Yeah, I think yours is a lot more of a straightforward shoot than mine was, so it might be better for you to start with yours, and then I'll do mine, which is kind of all over the place.
Sure, yeah. So I'm 25 now. I was unschooled my whole life. Pretty much radical unschooling, was never, asked to do any subjects at all. I think sometimes when people see my transcript, the feedback that I've gotten is, wow, it sounds like you did a lot more than my kid, which I can guarantee is just not true. It's all about the presentation and how it's written up, and whoopsie. Sorry about that. There we go. That won't happen again. Yeah, so I had not been intending on going to college, wasn't really on my radar. Decided that I wanted to go probably around 18 was when I first started to really become interested in it. One of my very good friends growing up, who was not unschooled, he went to public school, they brought me with them to Hampshire College to see a tour. I wasn't planning on going to college at all, but they said if any college was a college for you, it would be this one. And I was totally sold. Hampshire College is a little bit of an alternative model, so no tests, no grades, no core curriculum, but it is still a traditional school in that it's a 4-year BA producing institution where most people live on campus. And so I decided I wanted to go, and I told my parents, and we started working on putting together this transcript. The admissions process was actually really complicated. I think it's a bit of a myth that we tell people that college isn't more complicated if you're unschooled. It is. There's a traditional path that gets most people to college, and I didn't take it. And so because of that, there were things that were way more complicated and challenging, and the information just wasn't out there on what I needed to do. In order to get financial aid, colleges that receive any state funding or federal funding, which is most colleges, including private ones, require a high school equivalency as part of the admissions process. And I didn't get my GED. I didn't do anything like that. So the question of whether or not I had a high school equivalency was really not even all that clear. Eventually, luckily, because of the college that I was trying to go to, they read my transcript and felt very compelled that it was the equivalent of a high school education, but it was definitely not set in stone that was going to be the case. It was definitely a little bit touch and go on the instructions. For example, when you apply to college, you will be asked at pretty much any college to provide teacher recommendations. And most colleges don't really have a clear path of what to do if you don't have teacher recommendations. So, one person would tell us one thing, and then another person at the admissions office would tell us another thing, and it was a little bit of a runaround for a while trying to find what I could substitute and in what ways. So that was challenging. And then the challenge of writing up a transcript too. I mean, there's so many ways to do it, but so few examples that you can find online of what an unschooling college transcript would even look like. And the question of whether or not to break it down into subjects was huge, because I did not do math. And they do require 2 years of math, at least. And I don't have 2 years of math. I don't have that. And it is a requirement. So it was kind of a matter of figuring out what we could put in a category of math that was maybe true enough, I would say, and accurate enough, without highlighting the fact that I absolutely did not do math and did not meet that requirement. My transcript ended up being so long that I highly doubt anyone at the admissions office read it cover to cover. And I'm sure they assumed that math was somewhere in there without really checking, because it was like two lines. Emmett played Minecraft for a bit. There we go. You'll see if you look at the transcript at the end. It's not that bad, but it's pretty thin on the ground in that department. But yeah, they actually I only applied to Hampshire College, so that is one thing that is totally against the common wisdom around colleges. I was not trying to go to college. I was trying to go to Hampshire College. I didn't want to just go for the sake of it. I was in love with the way Hampshire has a very similar pedagogy to unschooling. So I was really set on that. And they admitted me with academic honors. So I got a financial award for my academics in high school, I think is the way it's worded. It's very funny. It was for critical innovation, maybe? Something like that. Some type of innovation award, which was helpful and cool, I guess. And then, yes, I went to Hampshire full-time, 4 years, was on a traditional track, graduated with my class, but I ended up going more or less a year older than my peers, mostly because of not really understanding the way college admission cycles worked. It's mostly the reason why, I think, ultimately. But yeah, that was kind of the journey for me, and it was definitely challenging. I think definitely more challenging than if I had gone to a traditional school and just, basically click a button and your transcript is done. But ultimately so much more rewarding. And I had this incredible opportunity to write up my life as a teenage unschooler into this transcript. And it's a little excessive in parts. It's a little over the top, but it got me what I needed. It served the purpose. That's basically me. And I can attach a copy of it into the chat. And Rhianon, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. All right. So as Emmett mentioned earlier, my story is very different from theirs. I am 23 now, and I was unschooled my whole life until I was 17. And at that point, I was starting to think about whether or not I wanted to go to college. At that time, I thought I wanted to go into equine science because I was very interested in working with horses. I'd been working with horses my whole life. So my parents suggested that I look into the local community college just to kind of get a taste for it, see if I liked it enough to actually pursue it. So I ended up applying and going to the Rhode Island Community College. And really interesting about community colleges, and I've heard this about most of the ones that you go into, is they don't turn anyone away. You just have to take what's called, at least for Community College of Rhode Island, it's called an AccuPlacer test, which basically just kind of assesses where you are academically so they can put you in the correct classes so that you're not basically failing out of classes that you shouldn't even be in. So I took that, I did decently, and I started taking 1 or 2 classes per semester. They didn't, because I was part-time, they didn't ask for a transcript or anything like that. So I started off only taking like 1 or 2 classes per semester. And then eventually I realized I didn't want to do equine science. I wanted to go into psychology. And that's when I started looking around at 4-year programs. And I found this online program, or kind of a hybrid program, called Post-University over in Connecticut. And I was super, super excited about it because you were able to get your bachelor's like super, super quickly. I think it was in two years total. And at that point I'd had about 10 or 11 college credits. And if you had that for post-university, you were able to just roll right in. You didn't have to take an SAT or anything like that. So I was like, okay, this will work perfectly. Because I knew by that point that I really didn't do well on standardized tests. I'd found that out with the AccuPlacer test. I knew it just wasn't going to be a good fit for me. So I ended up transferring over to Post University. And at that time, they told me that they were going to require a GED from me because I didn't have any record of me from the school system at all. They wanted some sort of a high school equivalency something, and I literally had no record of anything because we had kind of slipped under the radar, my family. So I ended up cold taking the GED, which a fun fact I learned, you don't have to do well on it, you just have to pass it. So I got that, and I did one semester at Post University and realized the online format was a horrible design for me. So I ended up going back to CCRI, starting there full time. And by that point, they had called me up and asked me, so, where's your high school transcript? I'm like, well, I don't have one. And they kind of did this, oh, well, we kind of need one. And then they were looking at my grades and they realized I had a 4.0, and they were like, maybe we don't need to ask this person if they have a high school equivalency. So they kind of dropped that whole thing. So I spent about another 2 years at CCRI. I got my associates. By that point, I'd been in college for 4 years. And I was in this program called, and again, I believe this is in other states as well, it was a joint admissions agreement program. And that is where essentially you're able to, once you get all your general education credits done, you're able to automatically transfer into a 4-year state college. You don't have to take SAT. There's no admissions test. It's just as long as you followed the plan that's set out and you make sure all of the credits are transferable, you're able to automatically go into this program, which for me, again, that worked out really well because I knew I didn't want to deal with taking any standardized tests. And it also provided a tuition reduction, which again was really good for me since I was paying out of pocket for my tuition. So I transferred to URI, which is the University of Rhode Island. And for the last 2 years, I finished up the latter half of my bachelor's, which essentially at that point was just my core courses in my double major of political science and psychology. And it was a little interesting because at that point I was definitely older than the majority of my peers there by several years, which made for an interesting environment. But it was a very interesting experience for me because I didn't live on campus. And so there was always this kind of separation feeling from a lot of the people who did live on campus and who also were, again, a bit younger than me. But I finished my bachelor's, graduated, and here I am now. But it was very interesting. And part of why I wanted to mention the back and forth that happened for me is that I think there's this assumption that when you go to college, you kind of have to go in for something like what you're going for and you stick with it. And that's really not the case. Like a lot of the times you're going to find that, okay, you've taken 2 years of college when you thought you wanted to be an English major. Now you've realized that that's not something that you're actually passionate about, or it's something that you enjoy doing, but it's not something you want to make a career out of. And it's okay to be able to shift your path, or if you need to take an extra year to get all your credits going, or if you wanted to do a double major, really emphasizing that it's okay to take that extra time and to realize that you don't have to have your plan perfectly set out. So that's something I wanted to emphasize. But I think that kind of gives you the general gist of my path in general. But if you had any specific questions about any aspect of it, I can definitely go into it further.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so if there are questions, I don't know if even some people want to kind of tell us why they came, whatever kind of comes to mind. We're happy to sort of answer questions. And I think one thing that Rhiannon and I have thought and talked a lot about is kind of the importance of, I guess, realizing that college isn't some test of whether or not unschooling worked, and whether or not your child is a quote unquote success. I think that's a message that, if I could speak for you also, Rhiannon, that both of us got when we were younger in the unschooling community, that going to college was some sort of measure of being a successful unschooler, and that, if you go to college, you're somehow proving to the world or to the community that the philosophy works. And I think that's something that we're both really conscious about, trying not to kind of propagate that college is just one path, and it's a path that works for both of us, and hasn't worked or hasn't been the top choice for a lot of our friends, and that both are super valuable and important, and that just like any other educational choice, college is just one way of continuing your education as an adult. So yeah, that's kind of definitely where we're coming from with this, but would love to answer questions if anyone has any.
We got one from Brenda Emmett. Brenda asks, can you talk about the ways in which you felt prepared and not prepared for college, both socially and academically?
Interesting. You want to go first, Rhianon?
Oof. All right. So socially, I don't feel like there was any part of me that wasn't prepared. But that was mainly because from the ages of like 13 onwards, I had been spending the majority of my days at a barn, being around people all the time and being in either managerial type positions or just in general, just being around a lot of different aged people and being very, what's the word I'm looking for? Self-sufficient, having a lot of self-agency. So socially, I don't think there was anything that I was necessarily unprepared for. Academically, I think that one of the biggest things that was difficult for me to do, because again, I was in a standard college situation, there were tests, there were exams, was learning how to take an exam, which is part of why I only started part-time and gave myself the opportunity to really learn how I needed to take tests, because that's not something that I was prepared for. And I don't think that's necessarily something you need to prepare your kids for, because again, I figured it out pretty quickly, but I do think it's helpful to understand that it is a specific skill. It's not something that you necessarily have innately. Like taking a test is a skill, especially if you're doing something like a standardized test, which I still am not good at. So in that way, I guess there was parts of me that weren't prepared, but I feel like the ability to learn on my own and the ability to really ask a lot of questions and question things critically, that definitely helped prepare me a lot academically, because I've always been someone who thinks very systemically. And so bringing that into a college environment was very useful, because it made it a lot easier for me over my peers to be able to really see patterns that the professors were talking about and understand, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z in order to reach this goal. Whereas I would ending up helping actually a lot of my classmates, even in like my first semester, because they were having difficulties seeing the things that I was seeing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I would say for me, socially, I had a way, way better time in college than I did in my life previous to college. I'd always had friends. I had a partner when I was like high school age, but I didn't have a really good close friend group. I wouldn't say I was having a great time socially. I had like some people, a couple of people from Nuke who I was really, really close with, but like internet friends for 31 weeks of the year. And then I went to college, and I kind of immediately fell into this amazing, super close friend group within like my first week, pretty much. And they're still my absolute closest friends. I live with one of them in this apartment. So that actually went sort of shockingly well, considering that I wasn't exactly the life of the party center of the friend group before college. And then, yeah, totally turned around in college. Like, amazing social experience. Although I did find that people in college bully. Like, I definitely got bullied in college. But I had a great, wonderful friend group the whole time. So it really kind of negated some of the like stress of that. And I do think it's different sort of getting bullied as an adult. It's never fun, but it's maybe to me was less traumatizing than I think some other people have explained. I was old enough to say like, you have your own issues, clearly. And then academically, Yeah, I was definitely unprepared for some stuff. I didn't have a really strong STEM background going into college. I ended up getting my degree in public health, but I think if I had been exposed to STEM stuff earlier, it probably would have been biology or biochemistry, which isn't to say that that's, better. I love public health and I'm super happy with it. But I think if I wouldn't have been playing catch up so much, I would have kind of gone further in some of those subjects. Um, I definitely had absolutely no idea about bio stuff when I was in college, really starting from the very basic beginning with that. Um, Even though I had been interested in science before, watching a bunch of sort of random YouTube videos that may cover one really specific thing but not another and aren't a full curriculum made it so that there were so many gaps in my knowledge and understanding that it wasn't reasonable for me to start out anywhere from like the very beginning. In fact, my academic advisor, was amazing, wonderful, understanding person who saw the sort of complexity of unschooling really clearly. Like she was really able to see the ways it benefited me and was a great thing, and also the ways in which it maybe left some gaps. And she approved me for an independent study, which was literally me going on Khan Academy and doing all of their high school bio. And I got college credit for doing that because I knew so little about bio when I first got there. And doing that allowed me to then move up into Bio 101 at college and eventually, chemistry and organic chemistry and kind of going a little bit further. So that was definitely something I was underprepared for academically, and just generally too, I was a bit underprepared. The first week of college, I totally had absolutely no idea some of the jargon that they used in these classes that I had just never heard of. I'd never written an essay before, except for the one essay that I wrote to submit as my essay for the admissions file. That was the only essay that I'd ever written. And so I got to college and they're talking about this 5-paragraph essay structure and the format. And I'm like, I don't know the format. What are you talking about? So the first week of college, I went to all of my classes with a notepad and I just wrote down everything that I didn't understand that seemed to be like the rules of school. And I went back to my dorm room every night and I spent like 3-4 hours every night just catching up on school stuff that I had missed out on and didn't understand. And within about 5 days, I was completely caught up and never had another issue with it at all, and did excellent academically in every single class that I ever took. Took classes off campus at other colleges that do have tests and grades, did great at them, got straight A's. It was great. But there's definitely a period at the very beginning of it that I was like not sure what was going on, very much feeling like, wow, people really have been training 12 years to do this. And I really just woke up one day and said, oh, I'm going to do that. But it worked out in the end. So.
Yeah, to kind of bounce, we have one more question, but just to bounce off briefly what Emmett said, I did have the same experience of I didn't really understand how academics works, but I found a really good way to help that was I just straight up told my teachers, look, I have never been in a classroom a day in my life before now. What would you recommend that I do? And I found that to be extremely helpful, especially because the second class I took was organismal biology, which was literally, I think, over half of the class failed that class, and I managed to come out with an A. And I think part of it was at the very beginning, I told the professor, I'm like, look, I literally don't know how to take tests. Like, I don't know how to study for them. I do not understand. Please help. And so he gave me a bunch of tips, and he made special attention throughout the semester to always check in with me and be like, look, I know you know what you're doing when you're taking these quizzes, but you keep getting C's. This is what you need to do to get a better grade in this. And I remember those things that he told me, and I was able to use them in other classes after that.
I did the same thing as well. I went to all my professors and I said, I was unschooled. That is what this means. I have not done this ever before. It's definitely a weird thing, but another thing I learned about it is there's no need to be shameful or apologetic about it. You don't have to be all, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just really don't know this. You can be proud of it and it's a fact. It's just a fact about me. This isn't what I've been doing my whole life. I'm doing it now. Help me get there. Like, it's just like any other student disclosing anything else. You're just saying, hey, this is where I've come from. And I found that my professors were super receptive to it,
Oh yeah.
especially if I didn't come in with this sort of like, oh, I have something to tell you about me. Just really, representing it more confidently.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a second question from Laura who asks, will you talk a little bit about where you are in your career path? Emmett, I think this might be mainly you because I still don't have a job after college.
Well, Rhiannon just graduated a couple of months ago and is in the process of seeking a job in the middle of a pandemic. Go easy on yourself here. Yeah. So when I was in college, as part of my undergraduate education, I started student teaching at a local high school. And when I was right about to graduate, I got a couple of job offers from other local schools. And the school I had been student teaching at said, don't accept any. Give us 1 week. And came back to me with a job offer for the next year outside of my degree, so the year after I graduated. I just finished that contract and I just started, or will be starting my new one in September with the same school. And the really cool thing about it is that it is a school that is specifically designed to take the philosophies of unschooling and make them available to people who wouldn't ordinarily have the option to unschool because of their social position, socioeconomic situation, number of parents at home. So it's basically this unschooling high school where kids get together and we offer classes. They don't have to take them. There's no tests, no grades, just a bunch of resources and cool older adult people in the building to help, guide and support them. And they do whatever they are interested in or don't do whatever they're not interested in. And it's great. So I get to teach classes. I teach 2 classes every year, but it's also totally not mandatory for them to attend. And I get to just hang out with a bunch of kind of free-spirited kids in a building all day, except during pandemics. Then I have to hang out with them on Zoom. But I don't think I'm going to be a teacher forever. I don't know what's next. I think eventually I'll end up in grad school, but I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, the goal is not necessarily to be a teacher forever because this is probably the only school at which I would be happy teaching. And there's just honestly not like enough room for upward movement at the school, which is like not a secret, everybody knows. But I would never, I don't think, transfer to a public school.
All right, so as Emmett said, I only graduated in May of this year. I was working all the time that I was in school. And so I have already held like a multitude of jobs. For the last 2 years, I worked as a baker, which was very interesting, a lot of early morning hours and then going to school. But at the moment, I've been applying to jobs since the end of April. I've been trying to get positions as either a research assistant in psychology. I've applied for caseworker positions. I recently applied for a paralegal position at the Office of Attorney General in Rhode Island, because again, I have a dual major, political science and psychology, and so they're kind of applicable to a number of things. I've also tried to get positions at more local nonprofits, like there's a domestic violence safe house in Rhode Island called Sojourner House, and I've tried to apply for a few positions there. So really, it's just kind of waiting to see if and when I get any interviews, since the process is extremely delayed. And that is something that I think it's very important to realize is even when it's not a pandemic, it can take a very long time to get a job after graduation. I think the whole idea of, oh, you're going to get all these offers after graduation. I think that if it applies to any degrees, I think it applies to more specific ones like either engineering or business. And especially if you have a more social science type degree or a health science degree like I have, it's a lot harder to find a job after you're done. And a lot of those jobs do not pay very well. Most of the jobs I'm looking at, it's going to be difficult for me to support myself on my own, to be perfectly honest. And so while I'm looking for those jobs, I'm also considering applying to get a master's in social work up at Boston University. And so I'm in the process of beginning those applications. And I wanted to, the big thing for me is I did not want to go straight back into college. I wanted to at least give myself some time to figure out what I wanted to do. Because again, I think that's something that happens to a lot of people, especially in my degree path, is you get the bachelor's and then you come out of college and you can't find anything for your job. And then you're automatic as well, I might as well just go back to college. But it's like, okay, but do you know what you're actually going back for? And how much debt are you racking up in this process? So for me, it was one of those things where I found this program and I was looking over it and I was reading it. I'm like, wow, this really resonates with me. And so I felt like this was a good choice. But I think in general, it's a good idea to if your motive is to immediately go to grad school, I would kind of question why and really check in with yourself. Because I've also discussed with a lot of my professors while I was in college in my last semester. And I would say 90% of them or more highly recommended that I take multiple gap years before trying to go back to school. They were like, they either said they wish they had or that they had done it and they thought it was extremely beneficial for them. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking to get into right now, at least. What would you like to do? Wait, I'm sorry, I'm getting what would you like to do? I hear you. Oh, I see. Sorry, Laura, I was trying to read the question there. I got a little confused. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment in my search. It's one of those things where I might eventually, if I can't find a job in my field, I might end up using some of my prior skills I have, whether that's teaching dance or going back into some sort of the baking industry. But at the moment, I'm in a well-supported environment, so I'm able to just look for jobs. All right, we have another question from Brenda who said, can you address the dynamics of having a degree when your unschooling peers may not? It's an interesting one.
That is an interesting one. Yeah, I can go for that. Yeah, I definitely think there is a dynamic. Like I had said at the beginning, there has tended to be a sort of impulse in the unschooling community to hold up people who have degrees as being some sort of success story extraordinaires. The more traditional the school, the better it seems in our community's sort of popular understanding sometimes. Which is just so strange to me, because it's such an alternative education community, and then it's in like suddenly college, and you are hoping for the most traditional path possible. It's just a very strange juxtaposition to me. But there's definitely a dynamic, I think, with people who don't have their degrees in the unschooling community. How can there not be with a community that kind of is holding up one group of people as being the ta-da success and another group of people as being, well, they'll find their way kind of reaction. Sorry, there's an ambulance right by. I don't know how loud that is. But yeah, I mean, I think it can be uncomfortable because I absolutely don't feel that way myself, but I also see the value and importance of having these types of conversations, because going to college when you're unschooled is harder and it is more complicated and there are more confusing steps to it. So kind of, I think, trying to balance these sort of like parental need to have space to talk about this and to see examples of unschoolers who did go to college just for like logistical reasons, and not wanting to seem like I'm ever putting it out there that this is the better choice or that I'm a more whatever type of unschooler than anyone else is definitely a struggle. It's something I consciously and actively think about and have for years. I've been doing unschoolers go to college talk for, I guess this will probably be year 4, maybe. Pretty much since I got into college and had done the process myself, I started doing these. And it's definitely something I've always thought about, and you know, it's a hard thing to bring up, I think. Because it sounds an awful lot like criticizing everyone in the unschooling community, which is definitely not not my attempt at all, but something that as a sort of community-wide, not pointing at any specific person, but a sort of community-wide mindset or mentality, I guess. Yeah, and so that's definitely something that I'm aware of and that I have on my mind. I mean, my brother did not go to college, and even by family members who maybe didn't approve of unschooling all along, still now who maybe aren't as on board as they could have. I feel like the golden child in the family, and my brother is who what. um, and I do think that's because I went to college and got a degree, and he didn't, and just got a job, and it's a hard thing to kind of deal with interpersonally also. So it's not just from within the unschooling community; it's also that validation, I think, from other people as well.
Yeah, definitely kind of feel the same way as Emmett was saying. And I think another thing, I can't remember if Emmett touched on this or not, is like it's very weird how much of a pedestal you get put on when you do have a college degree. It's that, oh, this is the success story. And it puts this bizarre pressure on you, and it makes you feel, I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word, but it definitely does create this anxiety feeling. Especially because I remember from a young age seeing all these talks, and even the last couple of years we had a few guest speakers come at the conference before we were the runners of it, when Catherine and Beth were still running it. And they were just so focused on the success story of college, whether it was a mom or a caregiver or just a general speaker. And it felt very strange and disconnected, especially because a lot of their advice, et cetera, didn't seem to really reflect what myself or other college-going unschoolers had experienced. So I feel like the dynamic it creates is more of, not so much, at least for me, not so much between me and my peers who didn't go to college, but it creates this weird dynamic between myself and unschooling parents. If that makes any sense. It puts that added pressure on you, and then it's almost like they're touting you around, saying, look, we are successful, and the focus almost comes back on the parents, like, look what a good job we did, these people are going to college. And like, I feel like that's the wrong mentality to have, especially with unschooling, which is such a child-centered thing. Is I always question when I see parents like really pushing this stuff. So I'm like, how much of this is about you and what societally you have ingrained in on you as something that's important, and how much of this is what the child actually wants and or what's best for the child.
There's also, I think, sometimes a pressure on both unschoolers and unschooling parents who lead these kinds of talks to say, oh, it's so easy. There's no, unschooling is not a barrier to college. It's not going to be harder because you were unschooled. I think there's a pressure to say that when it's not true. Because we want to believe that we've done things to make our kids' lives easier. I think everybody wants to believe that you're taking the right path to set your kid up for the easiest life possible. And unschooling in college is not that. You just have to be good with it. It's just true. There's going to be some downsides to everything, and I think one of the downsides is that it is more complicated, because the instructions that are clearly laid out by the world, the roadmap to college, you can't follow it. And if you don't have a roadmap, it's harder. It just is. And I think that's okay. And I think it's okay to say, look, it is more complicated, but the reward to me outweighs the difficulty. But I think that it's still important to say, hey, it is not easy when there's no roadmap for you to follow. That is a harder thing. And there's one time particularly, I remember Rhianon and I sitting in the back of a college talk that was being given by an unschooling parent, who was saying that it's not easy, it's not harder, it's just so easy. And, there's all this scholarship money available and just all of this stuff that just hasn't felt true to either one of our actual lived experiences as unschoolers. And we're just sitting there like, do we say something? Do you interrupt someone in the middle of their talk to say, actually, that's not really true? But you know, it's a hard thing because yeah, right. Everybody wants to feel good about their decisions. I don't know.
All right, we got another question from Pamela who asks, and this is a good one. I might ask you to clarify some specifics if you have a specific question within this, because there's a lot of hoop jumping. How did you deal with the hoop jumping that college applications required? I know as a parent, they hit me as challenges, but my kids have often seen them more as more personal criticisms and barriers. I would definitely agree on it being a lot of personal criticisms and barriers. Just to kind of jump into it right away, for instance, having to get the GED for post-university, it's like, I can show you, I literally have a 4.0. I clearly I have done math, English, science. I've done everything that should cover what you require of me, but you're still wanting me to have this piece of paper that I don't even have to do a good job on. I just have to pass. Like, you can almost fail the GED and still get a GED, and they don't question what you got on it. And just things like that really, it kind of perpetuates the criticisms and questioning that you experienced a lot as a young child in unschooling, where you get, you know, the random people coming up to you and like, oh, what's, you know, 2 times 8? And, you know, tell me what the capital of New York is, and something like that. It's that same thing over and over again. And I think because we've become so sensitized to it and so reactive to it, or at least myself, and I know some of my friends have, when you start to experience it more systemically, it hits harder than I feel it necessarily would for someone who hadn't been experiencing that criticism and questioning of your existence for the majority of your, well, now adult life. So that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know if you had a specific question within it, but that would be my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what you just said is totally true, right? When it's your whole entire life, it hits as being more personal. Especially, I think when you're at, I imagine the kids that you're referring to are maybe in their teenage years, and I think especially at that age, it hits really hard because you don't yet know how much of a barrier unschooling is actually going to be. You don't yet fully know how much of an issue this is going to be, and then you start to, you know, maybe branch out and encounter some of these things, and it's like, man, is this really going to be my whole life? Is this really this level of questioning, not being able to just fill out paperwork like a normal person? Like, is this going to be how it is forever? And as it turns out, I think it's not, right? As you get older, right, a lot of these things just kind of fade away. The older you get, the less relevant where you went to high school is. That's just really not something that comes up, I think, so much once you get to be a certain age. But when you're a teenager, it comes up all the time. It's all anybody ever can think to talk to you about. And so I think you're totally right, Rhian, when you said that when these barriers start to be systemic rather than just a sort of social inconvenience, you're already kind of coming to that moment with some, maybe trauma is too strong a word, but like heavy negative associations. And so you're entering the space with that sort of looming anyway, that like, oh my God, this again. And I think especially as a teenager, it's so hard to kind of cope with those feelings because you just don't know what is going to be out there as far as what this is going to look like for the rest of your life. I don't know if that gives any practical help on dealing with it. But I think as it turns out, it is just a bureaucratic inconvenience. But I remember being a teenager and thinking, oh my God, this is going to be my whole.
The one thing this made me think of it. This is something I wanted to mention earlier, and while we're waiting for more questions. Also, I wanted to mention, although this does technically end at 2, we can extend it forward. We moved Alex's discussion to 3 p.m. so we have plenty of buffer time, so we can take this longer if we need to.
Wait, we moved it to what time?
Alex has moved to 3. He's not directly after this.
Oh, great.
Anyway, while we're waiting for if anyone has any other questions, I wanted to touch on, I don't know how much of a thing this was that Emmett had to deal with, partly because I know Emmett wasn't dealing with transferring to different colleges within college.
Sure.
But the amount of self-advocacy I had to do for myself in college, I found honestly disgusting. There was multiple times and I saw an advisor basically every semester. I followed my degree evaluation worksheet, which is basically, it tells you what classes you need to fill to get like the certain requirements met. There's so many opportunities that I missed that would have been extremely beneficial for me. Like, for example, there was something called a interinstitutional transfer credit type thing where I was, through CCRI, I was able to take classes at Rhode Island College or University of Rhode Island for the same CCRI price and have them transfer back to CCRI, which I was not informed of until literally the last semester I was at CCRI. And at that point, I'd been at that college for 4 years. And their excuse to me was, well, it's in the student handbook. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that this is something that I know about. Like, your job as an advisor is to help advise me for to help me succeed academically. And because you knew I was transferring to URI, this would have, to me at least, would have been something that I would have had brought up right away to let me know all of my options. There was also, for instance, the honors program. I did not realize we had an honors program at CCRI until, again, the last semester of my 4-year college experience at the Community College of Rhode Island, when someone just happened to bring it up to me. And I think it's very interesting that, sorry, I was just reading a comment that popped up for me. I think it's very interesting that there's this assumption that you know everything that's happening at your college. And to a certain extent, I agree, there is some personal responsibility you need to take, especially in regards to, doing well in your classes and making sure you're, staying up to date on things. But there's also stuff like just knowing what's going on in your college in general that I feel like, and I experienced this also at URI, there's a severe lack of student support where they basically help build a system and help build you up the best they can. I feel like that's very lacking. And so basically I came to the conclusion with my years at URI is if you think something might exist, or you're wondering if something might exist, or if you're even just theorizing, hey, is this a possibility? You have to ask, like, not only your advisors, but ask the faculty. And if someone's like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Like, this was something that we were thinking about doing for a while, and you have to just keep digging and digging and digging at it, because they just don't, they don't help you help yourself. I just got a message saying that, Tony, you wanted to speak on something?
Yeah, you can feel free to unmute yourself and speak. Anyone can, you don't have to.
I was just saying that including something in the student handbook is probably the best way to hide it from the students. I don't know if this was anybody else's experience at college, but for a new student, orientation can be really information heavy, and you do not feel like reading the student handbook after a week of orientation. So yeah, I agree that self-advocacy is important, but just because it was technically in some of the college literature, the college needs to do a lot more work to actually make sure the students know their options.
Yeah, orientation was terribly overwhelming for me. I cried every single day of orientation. Then I got it together. Then I was fine. But orientation is terrifying.
Jump kind of, I spent about 2 years as a dorm supervisor when Rick was in college. And one of the things I found myself doing for the girls in the dorm and for friends of ours on campus was helping them navigate the bureaucracy. Especially, their parents might be half a country, halfway across the country. And so they didn't have anyone to help them deal with financial aid paperwork and applications for this and that and the other thing. And so I agree that the structure to support doing that is just missing, just any college you're going to, really.
Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think college can be a really overwhelming time for anyone. It's a hard transition. It's a scary time in a young person's life, I think, and I think more so even for people who you're not only experiencing the unfamiliarity of dorm life and college life more generally, but also everything that is school.
I'm interested because, you know, I know intimately my own reasons for not going down the college path and, you know, why I made that decision, but I'd love to hear sort of what specifically for both of you was the thing that made you say, yes, college is the right decision for me. Was it, I know that the job I want to go into is going to require a degree and there's just no way around it? Or like, what was it? Did you try it out and like the experience, like what was it that made you make that decision to invest that time and go through that rough transition?
Yeah, for me, it definitely was I need to have a college degree to do any of the positions that I want to do. Because as I said, at first it was equine science, which you needed to have at least a bachelor's, and now it's psychology/social work, which in order to get any kind of decent position, you need to have at least a master's. So just by default, I just have to invest that time in going to school. But I wanted to know if I could. I'm a very competitive person, and so part of me was kind of competing with myself to see, you know, how can I do college? Like, is this something I'm able to do? So there was multiple reasons, but I think the major one was I just knew that any career I wanted to get into was going to require to have at least a bachelor's, like minimum.
That's such a good question, Alex. Yeah, I guess I feel like similar reasons to Rhiannon. Definitely part of me just wanted to see if I could. Absolutely. I also was the most competitive person about being in school possible. I mean, my friends weren't even competing with me, but I was competing with them. I had to be done with everything sooner, longer, like better writing, better evaluations. I was highly competitive about it, which I do regret in some ways. I mean, I was like really on that competitive school train. But I think a lot of that was just my own insecurity and wanting to see that I could do it, and I could do it at least as well as my peers. I definitely calmed down with that as school went along. I came in swinging with the like, I'm gonna write 4 15-page papers in one weekend and get it done, and just really was pushing. But I think the real big reason why I went to college, definitely a minor reason was to prove that I could. Definitely the big reason, though, was because I knew that I was drawn to working in social services. I specifically, at the time when I went to college, wanted to work in foster care for transgender youth, which is something I still want to do, actually. And so I got a job in it, but had to not go because COVID was starting. Very sad. had to turn it down last minute because of that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely still something I want to do. And I think if I do go back to school and get my master's, it will be a master's in social work. So I'm still very much on the same kind of train. I knew I wanted to work with kids, and now I work at a school I wouldn't be able to work at without my BA. So it was definitely like being drawn, I think, to some career paths and knowing that like you're not going to work with at-risk youth in a clinical setting without kind of having the degree to back it up. Especially because at the time my big goal was to open a home for transgender youth experiencing homelessness and kind of do a like transition to adulthood program, which is again still something I'm interested in doing. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was mostly knowing that I was drawn to a certain type of career, and then secondarily, super interested to see if I could. And then I went and toured Hampshire, and I was like, damn, this is for me. This sort of like social experience, the being in classroom experience, I just loved everything about it. And I just like immediately knew I was like, I have to do this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very good answers.
Thanks. Are there any other questions that people had on their minds, things folks were maybe hoping that we would get around to addressing today? Awesome. Well,
I just got one. I'll throw one in here.
Yeah.
And you can answer it short if you want to make it short. But you talked about a lot of the difficulties, the transitional things. What was the probably the strength going into college as an unschooler? What in that background was really helpful?
Independency. That's the ability to be really independent and self-sufficient, and that, and questioning everything, just never taking things at face value. That was really it for me.
Oh my gosh, so much for me. Yes, definitely being an independent self-starter. I am maybe the only person I know who doesn't have a problem with procrastination. I don't know if that's unschooling or just me. Yeah, and like Rhianon said, yeah, being able to question things, really coming at it with an inquisitive mindset. Not being down on myself for just not knowing things. I was talking about this yesterday too. Like my peers were just, I mean, if they were struggling with something, it was like the end of the world to them. Just immediately jumping to a place of being like, oh, I'm so stupid. I don't understand this. I can't get it. And when I didn't know something or was struggling, it would never have occurred to me to think badly about myself regarding that. Like it didn't even occur to me to say, oh, I'm stupid because I'm not getting this homework assignment. Like that wouldn't have even kind of crossed my mind. So being able to, right from the beginning, like not have that trauma around education, I guess, not have an automatic sort of bad taste in my mouth around some of these things was so huge. Yeah, and a sense of curiosity, right? Just really took classes and things because I was fascinated by them. Some of my peers, I'm sure everyone who's been to college has been to college with people like this, but you know, people are you know, looking up to see which professors grade easy because they want an easy A. And I just never thought about my education like that. Like it just, again, that just wouldn't have occurred to me to go about it that way. Like I wanted hard classes. I wanted to learn. I wanted people who were going to push me and challenge me. Never would have occurred to me to say, oh, I hope I can get Mr. Smith because I hear that he's an easy A class. Like that just, I wouldn't have thought to even think like that. And so I think that's a huge asset, having a level of curiosity and wanting to learn, genuinely wanting to learn. And I also think I was better at self-regulation. Like a lot of my peers struggled with, I mean, food, sleep, substances, homework time, just anything that they were maybe not used to having unadulterated freedom to. And I didn't struggle with any. I mean, almost everyone in my building got like stomach sick in the first 2 weeks because they had absolute access to ice cream and candy at the dining hall for the first time. I didn't. I was fine. And so I think some of those things too. Yeah, just like really being able to know myself and my own behavior, and you know, I didn't struggle with, oh, how do I manage my own time? I just did what I'd been doing all my life.
We have one more question from Brenda, who asks, can you talk a little bit about financial aid or debt? So it kind of depends on how you're going about it. I feel like how you're entering college and the sort of colleges you're going to. For me, I didn't qualify for any financial aid, but I was also lucky and privileged enough to be able to live at home, which meant any money that I did make, I was able to put directly towards college. So I ended up being able to pay out of pocket and not having any debt. But I also understand that that's a very unusual circumstance. Again, I was very privileged to be able to do that. That doesn't mean I didn't work hard, but if I'd had to live on my own and put all of my money towards rent and food, I definitely would have a ton of debt at this point. Scholarships do sometimes come about, but they're not something that you should think are going to be a dime a dozen. They're usually not very much, at least the ones that I came across. It was only like a couple of $100s, which maybe covers a textbook. And that's about it. And so financial aid, for me, it was interesting to discover, because again, I had never applied for any of this before, and it was just me doing this on my own, is that it relies so much on what your parents make. And so even if your parents aren't the ones contributing, if you're a dependent of theirs and they make over a certain amount, you literally don't qualify for any financial aid whatsoever. You can take out loans, but again, that's still debt that you're going to have to pay back at a later point in time. So that was my own personal experience. I know I think Emmett had a different experience with financial aid, so I'll let them discuss their.
Yeah, not qualifying was not an issue. Easily qualified for a lot of financial aid. I was actually pretty terrified about the money thing going in. That was a really big issue for me. College is mad expensive. I'm a first generation college student. My parents didn't go to college. Older brothers, cousins, aunts, uncles, no one went to college. So this was kind of a big deal, not just as an unschooler, but as a first gen college student. Yeah, college is mad expensive. Like unbelievably expensive, like so expensive it's painful to think about. And I think we overlook that a lot, right? Like there's a lot of things a young person can do with that kind of money, and college is just one of those things. And it's so expensive that it's impossible to justify that it's financially worthwhile. I personally have not seen the backing that says in this current moment that college is a financially viable decision. It's just the amount of debt that you walk away with, unless you really don't qualify for financial aid, which is a vast minority of people. You will walk away with hundreds of, well, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but yeah, I got probably close to $100,000 for college debt for my family. That's ridiculous. That's the most ridiculous thing I could ever think of. My degree isn't going to probably make that much money. I have a liberal arts degree from Hampshire College in public health, which should be a BS, but my college didn't do that. They only did BAs. So I have a BA in public health. It's not a great degree. It's a good degree. I like it. I got a lot out of my college experience, but boy, was it expensive. I would do it again. I don't regret going to college, even now that I'm kind of in my adult life and living with the debt and living with the consequences of it, which means I have the cheapest apartment in the cheapest part of Massachusetts possible. But I still love my college experience. I think that my degree will open doors for me. It already has, and keep doors open for me as I get older. And I have a pretty profound learning disability. So the more options that are available to me, the better, because I am limited by my learning disability in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's huge. The debt's huge. And I think this is part of the reason why like guilting or pressuring young people into wanting to go to college is so awful, because it's such a lifelong decision. I'm gonna have college debt for hopefully not ever, but maybe. We'll see. I want to pay it down, but it's just so much. It's just so much, and I work in a social services field. It's not the high earning field now, is it? But that being said, again, there is a lot of financial aid. Hampshire's asking price is $64,000 a year. Basically, nobody pays that. They have huge amounts of financial aid available. We got a lot, but still, it's not free. That's for sure. That's what I have to say about financial aid. I don't know. It's a big, big category, and I think we so often overlook the really devastating effects of having, more thousands of dollars of debt to my name than I have years in my age. That's intimidating when you're young.
I really
I don't know what
appreciate
else to say about
hearing.
it.
I really appreciate hearing your perspectives on that because, and I don't know if this is because of how it changes from generation to generation, but I think there is this sort of mantra that, oh, you can work an extra job or a part-time job, and you can come through college with no debt, and there's financial aid out there, and you don't need to worry about that whole side of things. Just go have the experience, get whatever degree you like, you'll be fine. And that's a really important thing to actually sit down and figure out of how much am I going to have to pay? How can I, if financial aid is available, how can I take advantage of that? Is that available to me? I appreciate hearing that perspective on it.
Yeah, and I'd also like to follow up and say, in order to make the money that I needed to make to pay for my college out of pocket. And again, I was going to a state school at an already reduced tuition because of the program that I was in. And I was working during the school semester, maybe only about, I want to say 16 hours a week. But during the summer, like as soon as the semester was out, there was one point in summer of 2018, I was working 3 jobs and an internship all at the same time. I had sometimes over 60-hour work weeks with 1 day off every 2 weeks. And I still barely made enough money to pay for my college for those 2 semesters. And it was one of those things where it limited what I was able to do. Like the money I was making, I needed to save every penny of it to make sure I had enough, not only to pay for tuition, but also to pay for my textbooks and to make sure I was able to pay, for gas money or food when I was at college because I didn't live on campus. And it just, the amount of work, like physically, like breaking work I had to do in order to pay for college, it just, as Alex said, I feel like the whole idea of just, oh, you can work 1 job and it's fine and, you can get enough money. It's really not a feasible thing anymore. I do know 1 or 2 people, especially those who are either in accounting or engineering or business degrees, who were able to get paid internships. But again, those are extremely rare. And I think a lot of where people are getting this idea that college is an easily accessible thing or something that's easy to pay for are people who are more in those STEM type degrees that get compensated way more than social service type degrees would.
Yeah, agreed. Same thing with me. I worked full-time through all of college. My college, Hampshire has a really strong financial aid commitment. So Hampshire was actually cheaper for me than going to my state school, which is wild because it was still so expensive. And they financially penalized people for living off campus. So I had to live on campus. And yeah, I worked full-time through all of college. I paid off some of my student loans while I was in school. I think I'm the only person in my friend group who did that. Everybody else either didn't work or worked and like kept their money for fun times. I worked and put it towards my loans, but still didn't even come close to paying for them as they were coming in. Yeah, and I worked at least full-time during the school year and then often over the summers. One summer I worked for my college's admissions office as sort of a 9-to-5. And then all of the time that I wasn't at the 9-to-5, I worked at McDonald's. All weekends, all evenings. Yeah, it's a lot of work and it still didn't even come close to touching my student loans. It's definitely a lifelong burden to have them. But again, it's a matter of weighing your options, and it's hard when you're 18 to know which one is better. I mean, they're both have such consequences for the rest of your life. And it's hard to navigate that choice, I think, especially when you're so young, and double especially when you haven't been to school and you don't really know what that's like. You don't really know what you're looking at. You don't know really what the school option looks like, especially for lifelong unschoolers who really haven't ever seen that.
All right, we have, and I think, yeah, it's definitely be a good idea for us to try to wrap this up now. Brenda has one last question, and this will definitely be a nice note to end on, Brenda. Thank you.
I love it.
Says, to end on a positive note, can you sum up the biggest positive from going to college?
I got an amazing friend group out of it. I mean, really just like lifelong best friends, a constant community. The community of alums for Hampshire is small. It's not a huge group, but very close knit. So I have a lot of opportunity and potential with that. And a degree that opens doors that already has, that gave me the chance to get the job I have now, which is like maybe the coolest job in the whole wide world. And that's pretty awesome. And a sense of security and stability as I go forward, knowing that I will always have this degree, and that gives me a leg up in some ways, in the workforce in some ways, definitely not in all ways. And yeah, I guess the experience of college too. I just absolutely loved college. I had an amazing time. I had a bunch of experiences I just never thought I would be able to have. Really great memories. Yeah, there's some big positives.
I think my positives are pretty similar to Emmett's. I think one of the best experiences, it was more particularly when I got to URI, because I wasn't very into my community at CCRI for a multitude of reasons. But not only was it a friend group that I was able to build, but a lot of these are people that I could network with later in life because of the degrees and paths that they're choosing. Like for instance, my friend Terrell, he's actually trying to run for office in state right now. And so there's a potential that I'll be able to help him on his campaign trail, which will be fascinating to do. And there's a lot of people I know who are going into law, social service, et cetera, that I know I can use to network, and we'll be able to help each other not only get jobs, but also be resources for each other. So that's, I think, one of the biggest positives.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you all for coming and for being here. Before we disband, I just wanted to do a quick plug for the fundraiser that we have right now. As many of you know, we're doing this conference for free, this sort of virtual conference, and we just launched a fundraiser alongside it, just to try and help us get a little bit ahead of the ball for 2021. So we're not in the same position for 2021 as we were for 2020, which was Rhianon and I fronting for the conference out of our personal finances, which, as you can probably assume from our life positions at the moment, are meager. So we're just kind of trying to get ahead of, kind of some expenses that we anticipate for 2021, so that we can have a really great paid keynote speaker, some more expanded events, and really just kind of put on the conference that I think we've all been really craving for years, for Nuke to kind of be revitalized a little bit and have some of these kind of new and exciting elements. And so I'm going to post a link to it in the chat. Of course, absolutely no pressure to donate. It's really just an opportunity for us to hopefully get a little bit of support from the community, but please don't feel pressured at all to donate. It's not a donation in exchange for your attendance today or any day.
Sharing is also very appreciated. We love it when you share it. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sharing is also great, and sharing into unschooling pages or groups that you might be part of is also really helpful. This is also a really exciting moment because this is the first unschooling conference that is by grown unschoolers. And so we're really excited about that as well. But that also means that, thank you. It also means that we don't have access to the community the same way parents often do. We're not in some of those groups. Unschoolers aren't often seen as being as much a part of the community sometimes as parents are. And so we actually intentionally are banned from many unschooling spaces. Facebook groups and such don't let grown unschoolers in often. So if you do have access to Facebook groups, feel free to post. We can't always, I'm in a bunch of them, but I'm in all that I can be. If I'm not in it, it's because I can't be. Which is totally fine. Parents need their space too. Everybody needs space that's just for them to be able to discuss things that are important to that group. So totally no hard feelings. But if you are part of one of those spaces, please feel free to share. That would be great.
Thank you so much, guys. And don't forget to tune in for 3 o'clock, where we'll be having our discussion with Alex. It's going to be great. So we'll see you guys in a little bit.